Liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis.
So it's now time to do some vector artwork. So I get a lot of requests from students about how to trace a real photo and create a vector trace of that so you can use it in logo design. And in this case, we're going to be creating a space badge that looks just like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to find a real photo of a spaceship. I'm just going to go retro and do kind of the old space shuttle design. So I just went to a couple of free websites you can go to. I've mentioned pexels.com a lot, so I just typed in rocket, and you can do a lot of different kinds of rockets. You can even do some of the more modern rockets, but we're just going to go for this Endeavour traditional space shuttle. We're going to go ahead and download that. We're going to bring that photo right into Adobe Illustrator. Just drag it right in or open it. And let's see what our document size is. We're just going to go to File, Document Setup, and we're going to just edit artboards. Let's see what our size is. So right now it's an 11-inch by 8.5-inch document, so that's perfectly fine. Or you can do an A4 if you are using a different measurement system. So I'm going to go ahead and get this to the right position where it's all the way on the artboard. And this is on its own layer, so I'm going to lock this so when I start to trace, I don't accidentally grab the photo by accident. So I'm just going to go over here and lock it and create a new layer on top, and this is going to be where our design will reside. So let's zoom in and let's get our pen tool ready. Let's do a nice dark stroke so we can see what's happening. Or better yet, let's find a color that will be high contrast that we can see our lines really good. So let's maybe add a little bit kind of a hot pink because there's nothing pink in this photo, and that will really stand out. And we're going to make it a stroke, so we're going to flip it to a stroke and going to take our stroke panel and let's make it, let's see, 1 point might be good. Yeah, let's go ahead and switch that to 1. And now we're going to start to trace. So when it comes to tracing people, you know, if a lot of people trace people and produce some vector artwork like you see right here as an example, what you want to do is you want to try to simplify a complex photo as much as you can and really keep the main elements intact. So with this rocket, some of the main elements I'm seeing is the main shuttle. We also have the booster rockets and then the main rocket here, as well as some details. So we're not going to be able to trace all the little details because we want to make this a nice, flat, clean design. So you don't want to do every single line in this one for this case. So we're going to try to simplify this as much as we can and choose what we think best represents this entire symbol. So let's get our pen tool, and what I like to do is start out with the main subject matter. So we are going to trace the shuttle. And in this case, it happens to be symmetrical. So the left and right sides are just reverse of each other. So instead of having to trace the entire outline and not having perfectly even lines on left and right sides, we're going to trace one half and then reverse it and reflect it and join those together using the shape builder tool, or keep them as separate elements and do this kind of two-tone look, which gives it a sense of highlight and shadows. So we're going to go ahead and divide this in half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up at the very top. I'm just going to click where I think the center would be. I click once, and I'm going to do that little trick where I hold down the shift button. So right now I can kind of guess where the middle is, but if I click here, hold down the shift key, I'm going to get a perfect line all the way down the center. And remember, we are not going to get too worried about all these little details. We are going to have to make some design decisions when it comes to what to include and what not to include. So I'm just getting this really basic outline shape right here. So I'm going to click here and hold and just kind of capture that whole bottom area. And I'm going to slowly move up the wing, just like we did with our vector tracing worksheet we did earlier. We're just slowly tracing everything. Don't get too caught up in those little details because we want this to be a very simple shape. So just creating a few anchor points as I go across. I'm going to complete my anchor point, click and hold, and try to see how that looks. And I like to flip these into fills just to see how I like the curves, if I need to go back with like a curvature tool, or if I need to go back with a direct selection tool and kind of make sure there's not any weird angles going on. And if you go to view, I have my smart guides on, so it kind of helps me when it comes to snapping things into the right place. So it's kind of very helpful. So once I'm happy, I can go ahead and copy this. I'm going to switch it to stroke, go up to copy, and I can do a paste in place. It's going to paste it right, another copy right on top. And I'm going to go to transform, and I'm just going to reflect. So just doing a simple object transform reflect, and I'm going to preview here to make sure it flips it vertically. Just like that. Click OK. Now I can slide this right in place, and since I have smart guides on, it's going to snap a little better for me. It's going to kind of help me. And I can always make sure those two are aligned perfectly at the top. So just go to my alignment and do a vertical align top, or a top alignment, just to make sure those are in place. So there we already have our rocket in place, and now we need to kind of do some details of the rocket. So we can start and do a divided, this is exactly a reflection of each other, so let's just do the left side again with the window. I guess this is a window. And I'm not going to get too wrapped up into the details. I'm going to simplify this for the sake of keeping it a nice simple flat vector. So I'm going to trace this, but I'm not going to be perfect with it. I'm going to make some design decisions, maybe make the window a little bit bigger. I can even make the window have a different contour if I wanted to. I'm going to make it a fill and just make sure I like the shape. So now we could do the same thing. We can copy, paste in place, and there's a little keyboard shortcut depending on if you're a Windows user or a Mac user, and we're just going to reflect it. And now we're going to reflect and do the same. We're going to do the same thing several times throughout this entire document. We can select both of these, align to the top, and do a fill to see if we like how the window looks. So what are some things that really stand out about this rocket? And you're going to have the same thing if you do vector artwork with a photo of a person. You're going to have to choose which highlights and shadows and main portions of the face do I trace over with the pen tool, because you can't capture everything about a real photo, because there would just be so many little tiny lines that it would just kind of make it a little bit busy. So what we're going to do is zoom out. And what I think we should keep is the window is pretty important, but I also think this top nose portion of the shuttle is a really important indicator that it's a shuttle. It's a very important graphic on it that helps us know, hey, that little black nose is a very important part of identifying it as a shuttle. So let's go ahead and take the pen tool. And this is where the shape builder tool comes in handy, because I can trace this. And I'm simplifying the line here, so instead of going up here and tracing it like this, you can do that, but I'm going to make it smooth to give it a more clean look. These are just little design decisions you can make. You can do whatever detail you'd like, and I'm just going to smooth that out. So those are those little decisions you make when you're tracing over a real photo. And one thing I could do is I can go over here and redo this whole corner and try to match that perfectly, or I could just use the shape builder tool. Go ahead and complete that shape. Make that a different color, and I could just cut that corner out with the shape builder tool. So what I want to do is I want to duplicate this bottom one. So I just copied the main left side here and just pasting in place to create another copy. So this is an additional copy to what we had before. I'm going to select both of these and get the shape builder tool, and I'm punching that out and also punching this bottom portion out. And so there I have a nozzle, and I didn't have to sit there and do it. So you could do either way you'd like, and I have a little copy here underneath that I can reflect. So I know that seems a little complicated, but it's not any different than what we were doing before. Go ahead and make that stroke so you can kind of see. And if we need to smooth this out and make it one continuous line, we can. Just taking the direct selection tool, just kind of straightening that out so they kind of come together. Looks like one smooth line across. So we have the nose, we have the window. Let's get our rockets at the bottom. That's a pretty important part of this rocket. So we're going to just start here. And we can make these rockets our own. It doesn't have to be a perfect copy. Just adding a little curvature there and tracing the rocket all the way down here. And each time I do this, it always turns out a little bit different. Let's make that a fill and see if we like the shape. We can always go back with our direct selection tool. If we want to make it more simple and blocky, we can. And then we could just simply copy and paste and reflect. And make that a stroke so we can kind of see all the strokes that we've created so far. We'll eventually create smoke a little bit later in this project. And we also want to add some depth, because if we go and we make both of these sides a fill, there's not a lot of depth added to this, or highlights or shadows. So if we want to add depth, you'll see like this has a kind of a shaft here. This is kind of where the cockpit is up here, and you have kind of the body of the shuttle, and here are the wings. So we want to add some definition by adding a little bit of shadowing. So you notice there's natural shadow here. So I want to see if I can't simplify that shadow and trace it using the pen tool. So I'm just going to follow this shadow here. I'm going to keep it smooth, just like I am keeping kind of a theme of having smooth angles, and just kind of tracing this shadow all the way down. Let's go ahead, since I'm ignoring, this is where the rocket is standing. It's like, I guess, kind of a place where it's being held. I'm not going to have that in my graphic. It's going to be flying in the air. So I'm just going to ignore that and just go ahead and extend the shadow all the way down to the bottom. This will help us, you'll see how it really helps it add a little bit of 3D pop to it, a little depth and dimension. So I want to smooth this out a little bit, and even get the curvature tool if you need to kind of double click and make it a smooth point. And here's what I want to do. I also want to get my corner round tool. So I'm going to get direct selection tool and just hold down and round those corners to give it a nice soft look. Same thing that we've been doing before, copy and reflect. So you can see how easy it is when you have something symmetrical. You don't have to do quite as much tracing. You just have to do half of the work. And so if you could add more details to your vector art, if you want to have a detailed vector version, you can add the American flag, you can add the NASA logo, you can even come back and trace some of these little details and lines. What I think is also distinct is kind of this darker black panels right here. That's something that I think would really help it define it as a shuttle. So let's add those. If we think it's too busy, we can always remove this detail later. So let's just go ahead and trace this. And instead of having to do all that trace all the way down, I can just do kind of a rough outside and do the same thing we did before and use the shape builder to punch it out. So sometimes it gets a little complicated. Sometimes you have to color code your layers so you can kind of remember what is what. So I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to copy, paste in place. I'm just copying that whole left side. So I could take this duplicate right here, select this, and get that shape builder tool. Just punch that part out. I might need to make that both a fill. Okay, now I can get the shape builder tool. Hold down Option or Alt so I can get subtraction. Punch out everything but that remaining section and just make it a stroke. So there we go. Voila, just a lot easier to do than having to retrace what I already traced. Is using that shape builder tool to save you some time. So I'm just going to round out some corners. So always get that direct selection tool and just make those fine adjustments. We need to get our handles and make it a smoother. You don't want kind of a jerky transition. That's kind of a jerky angle right there. So if I click on the direct selection tool, adjust the handle outward, it'll smooth it out. So I feel like we really captured the basic elements and essence of the shuttle. And we're going to move on to the rockets next. And at the very end, we're going to have all of our outlines done. We can make everything a fill and start to colorize everything, add a sense of depth with highlights and shadows. And we're just going to use flat colors. We're not going to use any crazy effects like gradients or drop shadows quite yet. We're just going to keep everything flat and simple single colors. but we're going to make it look a little more complicated with our highlights and shadow colors.